Yeah, 99 please, and confirm some of it's en route.
Confirmed and 99 being apprised. This is a stolen moped, for your information.
Yeah, it's not a moped, it's a high-powered motorcycle. Please don't you check the road at roundabout, on towards Fisher Road towards the cycle track.
I've done a few videos in the past touching on Airwave, the UK's emergency services radio network, but I've never gone into a great detail on how it works, how it's used, and what the radio sites look like. So in this instalment, we'll be looking at Airwave more closely, from how it works to how to identify transmitter sites, from security and etiquette to resilience in the event of a failure. I'll show you a selection of Airwave sites throughout this video, and later on I'll explain how they're linked together. Airwave is a Tetra-based radio system. Tetra stands for terrestrial trunked radio and is a European standard for a trunked radio system specifically designed for public safety networks. It's used by over 300 different organisations in the UK alone, including government agencies, emergency services, rail transport and the military, and the network is supplied and maintained by Airwave Solutions. Airwave provides communications interoperability between all police forces, the secret services, the military, and the Home Office, prisons being a large user under this category.
Station Road. Back to the cycle track and we'll shortly go.
On a side note, the London 2012 Olympics saw a special airwave network known as Apollo rolled out that was used by over 18,000 staff. Airwave was the official private mobile radio supplier to the London Organising Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and it built a completely new, independent communications infrastructure to meet the demand for the event. The 385 MHz service was used exclusively by the organisers running the events at all sites, as well as by the emergency services. The target was to share as much infrastructure as feasible, which was important as the area around the Olympic Park didn't have much in the way of cellular coverage, having long been a largely underdeveloped site. 18,000 digital trunked radios were divided into 1,700 user groups, spanning from transportation to doping controllers. The UK Police uses a system of handheld, vehicle-mounted or mobile, fixed desktop and Ethernet-enabled devices such as integrated communication control systems to facilitate communications at all levels. The Airwave terrestrial trunked radio network is classed as critical national infrastructure. It functions in a much more in-depth way than the old analog systems, and in order to ensure availability, confidentiality, and integrity of speech and data communications, the police has a multitude of procedures in place. These exist to maintain the security of radio terminals, maintain confidentiality, avoid radios getting into the wrong hands, and adhere to the national policy on the use of the Airwave network.
Station Road. Back to the cycle track and we'll shortly go.
So throughout this video I'll show you numerous Airwave transmitter sites. They're located everywhere, and while their location isn't secret, you can find out where they are publicly online if you know where to look. I won't give exact locations in this video where possible, but some are obvious. I expect a comment or two saying that I'm compromising national security or other such nonsense, but all of the information in this video is publicly available in official published sources that are easy to find. Airwave transmitter sites are quite easy to identify, as most consist of 3 sets of 4 stacked dipoles located around a steel tower. Some sites provide coverage in shadows created by buildings and consist of a single stack, and others are broken or removed, meaning less than 3 stacks are present. Alternatively, you may see these white verticals which house the antennas inside. Again, they're usually in clusters of 3. They sometimes share space with broadcast transmitters or cellular sites, and some are standalone. These standalone sites are commonly found in more rural areas. Some are really remote, providing coverage in areas where terrain blocks the signal from other locations. You may find them on water towers such as this, or on top of telephone exchanges like this. Transmitters are often located in clusters or groups that are all connected to each other via the use of microwave links. These are line-of-sight super high-frequency links that backhaul voice and data to and from different locations to provide the highest possible level of coverage. These clusters often overlap too, so you may see airwave transmitter sites located close to each other that aren't connected via microwave link. These clusters are spread across the whole country, providing a wide area radio network that will remain in service for the foreseeable future, while the Home Office finally gets to grips with the ESN network, a cellular-based system that will eventually replace Airwave. The deadline pushes further back each year, so we'll probably be in the realms of 6G mobile networks before this happens.
Station Road. Back the cycle track and
So, like in most organisations, there's a hierarchy, and each level within the police has a responsibility to ensure that Airwave runs at an optimal level of quality and security. This ranges from equipment audits, etiquette and conduct, confidentiality, and lost or stolen radios. Firstly, there's a head of radio communications in each force, and they must be an officer of NPCC rank. This officer chairs what is known as the Radio Executive Steering Board, or RESB, and is the senior responsible officer for radio communications within the force. Next is the Radio Operational Support Team. They report to the RESB and are responsible, in partnership with suppliers, for oversight of the operational use of the network and the management of overt Tetra devices. The ROST is responsible for providing communications tactical advice 24/7 and also has to provide quarterly reports of lost devices to the Home Office. In addition, any radios that require forensic examination, are suspected of being tampered with, are stolen, or the subject of social engineering attacks must be reported within 48 hours. Then we have the Radio Services Team. The police outsources administration of its radio devices to third-party suppliers. It's the responsibility of the Radio Services Team to manage these contracts. Radio Services provide a 24/7 on-call facility accessible by the Radio Services Help Desk. Then we have unit commanders, which are ultimately accountable for the officers, staff and equipment, including radios, under their command. Most base command units, or BCUs, delegate the responsibility of securing and maintaining and the usage of airwave equipment to the HQ superintendent. Now we come to local terminal custodians. An LTC must be an officer of at least the rank of inspector and serve as a single point of contact for radio policy and issues on their unit. LTCs are responsible for all devices under their command and must ensure that adequate procedures are in place to monitor and maintain the security and integrity of the radio fleet. They're also responsible for the reporting of and investigation into any lost, stolen or missing radio terminals without delay. Again, tampered, targeted or stolen radios have to be investigated and escalated immediately. Then we have local terminal administrators, who are responsible for the daily administration of all devices allocated to their command unit. They maintain the asset management database, keeping it up to date with the details of the person to whom each radio terminal is issued within their command. They have to ensure that the alias database is updated every time a terminal is personally issued or redeployed to an individual. Users are responsible for ensuring their devices are correctly assigned prior to each deployment. LTAs also maintain a local register of all ancillary equipment such as batteries, battery chargers, desktop radios and so on allocated to the command unit. They also audit all radio terminals on their unit on a regular basis. Once every 12 months, all personal issue terminals are audited. This audit can be conducted by simple verification with the individual that they've checked their device, the tamper seal is intact, and they still have the device, and it's stored securely. Once every 3 months, a physical audit is carried out for all pull terminals by personally ensuring every device is accounted for and the tamper seals are intact. Pull radios are considered an official sensitive asset and attract a higher level of security. They must be stored behind 2 locks, for example a locked cabinet within a police station, but remain accessible as operationally needed. LTAs also maintain a record of all disabled radio terminals allocated to their command unit. They ensure all defective radio equipment, including out-of-date batteries, are returned to managed radio services. They ensure that officers and staff leaving their command units return all radios. Ensure processors are in place to check battery chargers, desktop radios, and any other equipment allocated to the command unit. And report regularly to the LTC on the condition and stock levels of the radio fleet. Operational users fall into two categories: supervisors and users of terminals. Supervisors of Tetra devices must be familiar with the responsibilities of their staff when using Airwave and have procedures in place to ensure their staff comply with them. Their responsibilities include the immediate investigation of any lost or missing device. They also have to ensure the immediate reporting of any device suspected to have fallen into the hands of individuals not authorized to possess it. They have to ensure that any device not accounted for within 48 hours must be reported, regardless of any suspicion about theft. And they have to ensure the reporting of exceptional incidents, for example tampering or targeted theft.
Station road. Thank you, cycle track, and we'll shortly be outside.
Etiquette is an important factor for users of the Airwave network. Communications should be precise and factually accurate. The officer has to press and hold the PTT button and await connection. Then they state the call sign being called, then their own call sign before passing the message. At the end of the message, they should use the word over to indicate a reply is sought, or out to signify the end of communications and that the channel is free for other users. Messages should be as short as possible to avoid network congestion. I also read somewhere that overs are billed by the second, so this keeps costs down. The officer should avoid unnecessary repetition, and longer conversations must be broken up with the use of the phrase "Roger so far." This allows other units to get in if they have more urgent traffic. Alternatively, traffic such as this can be conducted by telephone or point-to-point off the working talk group, which we'll come to soon. Messages must be clear, to the point, and in plain English, especially when using multi-agency talk groups where other agencies may be involved. Urgent messages should start with the keyword urgent or phrase urgent assistance, or by use of the emergency button, and be followed as soon as possible with the unit's call sign and location. When an urgent call is placed, all other traffic should immediately cease. Use of this status is reserved for incidents of imminent threat or harm. Using the emergency button tells the network to prioritize the call. Active messages should start with the unit's call sign and the keyword active. All other traffic other than urgent messages must cease, and priority is given to traffic between the unit and control room. And finally, unless otherwise stated, traffic will be assumed as routine and must give way to active or urgent messages. It may be necessary for users to request permission to use the talk group from the controller, especially during larger operations. Users mustn't monitor a talk group unless operationally necessary. When deployed on operation, users should only use the talk group assigned to them and mustn't use other talk groups including their own unit's talk group. Conversely, only users involved in an operation and authorized to do so should monitor the talk groups allocated to the operation. Scanning of other talk groups impacts adversely on network capacity and can also be considered a breach of data protection and computer misuse legislation. In a control room, the same level of etiquette is expected. The controller should press and hold the PTT button and await a connection. Then they state the call sign being called, followed by the originating call sign before passing the message. At the end of the message, they also use the word over to indicate a reply is sought, or out to signify the end of communication and that the channel is free for other users.
Station road. Thank you, cycle track, and we'll shortly be outside.
The Airwave system also allows back-to-back operation, or DMO mode. DMO, or direct mode operation, provides voice communications between two or more handhelds or mobile terminals without the use of Airwave infrastructure. This is the equivalent to back-to-back on an analog radio system. Range is limited, dependent on the power of the device and the surroundings of the transmitting and receiving devices. It's also affected by buildings and terrain and can only be relied on over line of sight distances. Officers I've spoken to have all said that DMO is all but useless, with a range of just a couple of hundred metres at best. This function is available irrespective of the availability of the Airwave network, and is a suitable fallback facility in the event of a network failure. Control rooms are not able to receive DMO calls. In order to communicate via DMO, both the transmitting and receiving devices must be set to DMO mode and have the same talk group selected. The majority of Sepura handsets are configured to enter and exit DMO mode by pressing and holding 9 on the keypad. Gateways exist to rebroadcast a single talk group from the trunk network, or TMO, to a single talk group in DMO. These exist predominantly in vehicle sets, but are also deployed in certain buildings with known coverage issues, and in portable packs in various units. They can be useful for extending TMO coverage into buildings or other locations where it's not otherwise available.
Station road. Thank you, cycle track, and we'll shortly be outside.
Many talk groups have been configured for use in the London Underground system, but capacity for concurrent use is limited. At a small number of subsurface stations, there's capacity for 7 simultaneous conversations, but in the majority, there's only 3.
Station road. Thank you, cycle track, and we'll shortly be outside.
The Airwave network is not guaranteed to offer coverage to handheld devices within vehicles. The mobile or vehicle device is a much more powerful radio with a better antenna. Additionally, the use of a handheld device while driving contravenes road traffic legislation, therefore mobile devices must be set to monitor the user's working channel unless operational demands dictate otherwise. I find this quite interesting because amateur radio and CB operators can use handheld radios while driving, and Airwave falls under the frequencies that are legal for mobile radio operation.
Station road. Thank you, cycle track, and we'll shortly be outside.
The police's official line on coverage is, quote, "Coverage is not guaranteed and cannot be relied upon in buildings or vehicles. In the event of loss of contact with the control room, radio users have to seek alternative methods of making contact as a matter of urgency. The following actions should be considered: moving location if possible, activating and deactivating transmit inhibit to reset the network connection, placing a mobile or landline telephone call to the force control room or supervisor, returning to a police station if operationally acceptable, or going to the nearest public service building, advising them of the situation and requesting the use of their telephone to contact the police control room. If a radio fails or there's no coverage, an officer must use an alternative way to communicate. Not ideal if that officer's in a dangerous situation or injured, but what happens if a site fails?
Station road. Thank you, cycle track, and we'll shortly be outside.
If a power outage occurs, Airwave sites have battery and generator backups, which usually last until an engineer gets there to deal with the problem. There's also multiple levels of resilience built into the network too. The purpose of providing resilience is to safeguard critical communications against circumstances which potentially could result in a network failure. A resilient network will continue to operate even in the presence of faults. Multiple equipment failures can be withstood whilst maintaining operations. For example, the zone controller has a redundant configuration with an active and standby computer unit. Automatic switchover is triggered by the detection of a critical hardware failure, for example a CPU card failure or a loss of power. The switchover is very fast because all configuration and subscriber databases are mirrored at all times. This redundancy not only guards against faults, but also allows software upgrades to be performed online. Airwave base stations can be optionally fitted with redundant base radios or BRs, and a redundant Tetra Site Controller or TSC unit operating in a state of constant readiness should any active device fail. When not active, the standby base radio is powered up but not transmitting. When the system detects that one of the active BRs has failed, the backup BR is switched into service at the same time as the failed BR. If the fault occurs on the radio supporting the main control channel, or MCCH, the MCCH is automatically switched to another radio. Similarly, failure of an active TSC in a BTS will lead to the standby unit being automatically brought into service. So I hope you enjoyed this more detailed look at Airwave. Naturally, a lot of the detail on the actual radio side of things is either redacted in official documentation or classified altogether, and rightly so.